Camilla's yacht photos leaked. And the very next thing that happened wasn't a scandalous tabloid frenzy. It was Prince William quietly calling a private meeting at Kensington Palace. Carrying a thick folder of financial records, port logs, and lobbying disclosures. What he walked into that room with wasn't just paperwork. It was a power move years in the making. And if even half of what's being reported about that meeting is accurate, then what we're watching isn't just another royal controversy. It's a quiet power shift. One that's been building for months. And it's finally becoming visible. Because the future king just made one thing crystal clear. The monarchy is changing. And he's the one changing it. So what exactly happened? Camilla took a trip on a luxury yacht called the Esperanza 3. A Malta-registered vessel. Owned through a Luxembourg holding company. Linked to a Swiss-based financier. And right away, that detail matters. Because the ownership structure was layered. Multiple countries. Multiple corporate entities. Technically, that's common for super yachts. Tax reasons. Liability reasons. But when you're a senior member of the British royal family, and your entire job description is maintaining public trust, accepting hospitality from an asset that's deliberately structured to be opaque is, let's call it, optically challenging. Even if nothing improper happened. Even if it was just a holiday. The problem isn't necessarily the trip itself. It's that the trip was taken at a time when Prince William had been pushing for months, over a year according to some accounts, for stricter internal guidelines. He reportedly wanted senior royals to avoid anything that could create the appearance of favoritism. Or privileged access. That's the context that makes everything else fall into place. Without it, the yacht trip just looks like a bad PR decision. With it, the yacht trip looks like someone either didn't get the memo, or didn't think it applied to them. Now let's talk about the timeline. Because this is where it gets really interesting. The trip allegedly took place in early July 2026. At almost exactly the same time, William and Catherine were doing the kind of bread-and-butter royal engagements that keep the institution looking grounded. Visiting a children's hospice in Birmingham. Meeting veterans near Edinburgh. Very much the opposite of the French Riviera. And according to reports, William learned about Camilla's holiday before any photos made it to the press. Someone with knowledge of the trip allegedly contacted Kensington Palace directly, believing the situation was serious enough that the future king needed to know before it hit the newspapers. If that's true, then the story was never really exposed by a leak in the traditional sense. It was flagged internally. By someone inside the circle. And that changes the entire nature of what happened next. Because William wasn't reacting to public embarrassment. He was reacting to information that reached him privately. From someone who thought the situation was problematic enough to bypass normal channels. And this is where William's response becomes really interesting. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't try to spin the story. He called a meeting. At his own residence. With a folder full of documents. Financial records. Port entry logs. Lobbying disclosures. A detailed summary of the earlier yacht trip. Not a few talking points. Not a vague list of concerns. Documents. The kind of preparation that suggests this wasn't a reaction. It was an investigation. He walked into that room wanting to know three things. Who had known about the earlier trip? Why hadn't that information reached the highest levels of the royal household? And what exactly had King Charles been told? This is where the account gets genuinely uncomfortable. According to reports, one official admitted that concerns had been raised internally, but couldn't explain why they hadn't been fully escalated. Another reportedly confirmed that Charles had only received a basic overview of Camilla's travel plans. He allegedly hadn't been informed about the yacht owner's identity, the lobbying connections, or the financial relationships linked to the trip. If that's true, then the palace's internal reporting system essentially filtered out the most sensitive information before it ever reached the king. And William's reported conclusion was that the system had failed. Not that one person made a mistake. Not that Camilla made a poor choice. But that the entire process for flagging potential issues was broken. From there, William reportedly laid out 3 demands. First, a full written disclosure, covering both yacht trips, to be submitted to the King's principal private secretary within 7 days. Second, a thorough review of all of Camilla's charitable patronages, to identify any possible connections with outside donors. Third, an immediate suspension of all contact between Camilla's household and the yacht owner, while the matter was being examined. That third one in particular is striking, because it's not a request for more information. It's a directive. It's an action. And it suggests that William wasn't just trying to understand what happened. He was trying to contain it. The pushback reportedly came from Camilla, through Charles. She insisted she had never intended to mislead anyone. Charles reportedly warned that launching a formal review would only generate more headlines. And honestly, I can see both sides of that argument. Charles's position is the pragmatic one. If you investigate, you validate the story. You give it legs. William's position is the institutional one. If you don't investigate, you signal that accountability doesn't matter. And when Camilla's office later submitted what was described as an incomplete disclosure, that William's team rejected outright, the disagreement stopped being private. It became an open clash between the offices of the future king and the queen consort. That's not nothing. That's a structural rift. Now let's talk about the yacht owner, because this is where the story gets more complicated. The vessel was reportedly owned through a complex overseas corporate structure, which made it difficult to identify who ultimately funded the trip. One of the directors connected to the company was previously mentioned in a UK parliamentary report, examining concerns about foreign influence and property-related matters. To be absolutely clear, the report did not accuse that individual of any crime. There's been no finding of wrongdoing. But the company was also said to have links with royal charities and heritage projects. So what you have is a situation where the same individual appears in multiple contexts. Political donations, charitable connections to the monarchy, private hospitality extended to a senior royal. Even if every single one of those things was completely above board, the overlap creates an appearance problem. And in an institution that relies on public trust, appearance problems are real problems. The fallout, according to reports, has been gradual but noticeable. Camilla's official calendar has reportedly become lighter. Several solo engagements were reassigned to other working royals. Her office underwent restructuring, with a smaller team. And reports claim her access to some senior palace briefings became more limited. At the same time, Catherine has reportedly taken on a growing number of important engagements, including some originally linked to Camilla. There was also a family weekend at Highgrove, attended by Charles, William, and Catherine, where Camilla was reportedly absent. No official significance was attached to it, but commentators certainly noticed. At around the same time, Charles attended a major film premiere without Camilla, even though she had been expected to join him. The official explanation was a scheduling conflict, which could be entirely true. But when you stack these data points together, lighter calendar, restructured office, missed appearances, limited briefings, they start to form a pattern that's hard to ignore. What's particularly interesting is how William has reportedly handled all of this. Not through public confrontation, not through leaks to friendly journalists, but through process, documents, deadlines, formal reviews. It's a very different approach from how palace scandals have been managed in the past. And royal commentators have pointed to previous decisions involving Prince Harry, Prince Andrew, and even Camilla's sister Annabel Elliot as examples of William's preference for dealing with sensitive issues quietly and systematically. He reportedly believes that lasting decisions should be made through careful planning rather than dramatic public statements. And if that's accurate, then the yacht controversy was never really about punishing Camilla. It was about establishing a precedent. The message isn't, "You made a mistake." The message is, "The system that allowed this mistake is going to change. And I'm going to be the one changing it." The longer-term implications are where this gets genuinely significant for the future of the monarchy. William is said to support a leaner institution with fewer working royals, stronger financial oversight, clearer governance, and stricter safeguards against conflicts of interest. Royal commentators believe this approach was shaped in part by the lasting impact of Princess Diana's death, which highlighted the dangers of secrecy and institutional protection. The idea is that transparency isn't just good PR. It's a protective mechanism. If everything is documented and declared, there's less room for the kind of speculation that erodes public trust over time. And if that's the vision William intends to implement when he becomes king, then what we're seeing now is essentially the early rollout. The yacht controversy didn't create that vision. It just gave him an opportunity to demonstrate it. As for Camilla, it's important to note that she remains queen consort. She still appears alongside Charles at major state occasions. She retains all her official titles. None of the reports suggest she's been stripped of anything. But what they do suggest is that her influence within the day-to-day operations of the institution has diminished. Not through a dramatic removal, but through a quiet recalibration of who does what and who gets access to what information. And looking ahead, many royal experts believe the biggest changes would naturally come after Charles is no longer on the throne. At that point, much of the institutional support connected to his reign would end, and the crown's major responsibilities and assets would pass to William. The extent of Camilla's future public role would depend almost entirely on William's vision. And based on everything that's been reported about his approach to governance, it's hard to imagine that vision includes a prominent role for someone whose judgment has reportedly questioned this directly. Of course, all of this comes with a significant caveat. Much of what's been reported comes from unnamed sources and media commentary. Buckingham Palace hasn't confirmed the details of the Kensington Palace meeting, the reported demands, or the alleged restructuring of Camilla's office. These are claims and interpretations, not established facts. But even with that caveat, the story has weight because the contradictions are visible. The trip wasn't declared. The earlier trip wasn't declared. The ownership structure was opaque. The connections to charities and political donations existed. And William's reported response, documents, deadlines, formal reviews, fits a pattern of behavior that's been observed across multiple situations over several years. Whether every reported detail is accurate or not, the broad outline is consistent with the direction the monarchy appears to be heading. What I keep coming back to is the folder. The image of William walking into that meeting with printed documents, financial records, port logs, lobbying disclosures. Because that's not the behavior of someone who's just annoyed about bad press. That's the behavior of someone who's been waiting for an opportunity to demonstrate how things are going to work from now on. And if the reports are even partially accurate, the message was received. The monarchy, according to these accounts, is evolving step by careful step. Not through abdications or public firings, but through the quiet accumulation of procedural changes that gradually shift who holds influence and who doesn't. And here's my honest take on all of this. The yacht photos may have triggered the conversation, but the conversation was already long overdue. William didn't react with anger. He didn't demand a public apology. He didn't try to humiliate anyone. He walked in with documents, asked specific questions, and laid out clear expectations. That's leadership. That's someone who understands that real power doesn't need to shout. And if you think about it, that's exactly the kind of king this institution needs. Someone who values accountability over appearances, process over drama, and transparency over secrecy. The monarchy has survived for centuries, but it's only going to survive the next century if it adapts. And based on everything we're seeing, William is determined to make sure it does. Subscribe to the Meghan Markle Report for more royal stories you won't hear anywhere else. Drop your thoughts below. Was William right to investigate? I read every single comment. See you in the next one.